Good morning to everybody just joining now. Going to give folks about another minute to come in, and then we'll start kicking off. I think I see a couple of new names here, which is awesome. We have Rajib from our team joining as well. All right. Well, we're giving people a minute to join up. I'll just get started on our intro and some of the details for today's session, and then we'll kick it off. So yeah, welcome to everybody. On behalf of Smart Dolphins, I'd just like to say thank you for joining today's session on IT planning. My name is Ty. I'm one of the VCIOs here at Smart Dolphins. So my role is really focused around IT planning, long-term guidance, being that connection between the technology and business decisions and business strategy. I'll make a quick note as well. You may have seen a little recording notice pop up. So we are recording today's session. So you'll be able to refer back to that. We'll send out a link after today's session is over. And we've got all kinds of topics covered. A couple of coming up in next week or two here. On December 2nd, we have a Microsoft Planner getting started session. So just the basics of Microsoft Planner, how to dive in there and start leveraging that tool. We also have a Microsoft Word Beyond the Basics, so a bit more of an advanced dive into Microsoft Word if you've done any of our basics session. Be sure to stop by smartdolphins.com/training. We've always got new sessions going on. We have recurring monthly cybersecurity training as well. So if you have new staff and you want to make sure they've got at least a baseline understanding of the threats that are out there, you can make that part of your employee onboarding and send staff. It's completely free. It's great even for staff that maybe haven't attended those sessions in 6 or 12 months and need a bit of a refresher. So for today's session, we're going to cover a few topics around planning. First, talking about how and why IT is really strategic, and it has a home amongst your other business strategy conversations, and needs that attention. We'll talk about building a vision for your IT and how we work backwards from that. Who to include in your planning, because that's really important. What to include. And then we have some question and answer time at the end, but I would really encourage people to chime in at any time with questions. This is a brand new session, and I've left a little bit of room so we can have those ad hoc conversations as we go through and dive into any topics. So why invest the planning time in your technology? Why is this so important? Well, IT is strategic. It's not just an expense. Historically, we've seen IT's been seen as a bit of a sort of a repeatable cycle. Every few years we have a server that ages out, and we replace that server. We move all of our files over to the new one. We move our databases. We move our accounting software, and then run that for another 5 years, and then rinse and repeat that cycle. And I've been in the industry for about 15 years now, and that's more or less how it's gone. But that's changing, and has changed a lot over the last couple of years. Cloud-hosted platforms have evolved a lot in the last 2 to 3 years, especially. So we want to start breaking the old server replacement cycle and get that retired. Or at least start eating the elephant. There's a saying, how do you start eating an elephant? Well, it's one bite at a time, and many items on your IT plan, will need that approach. For some, moving their accounting software to QuickBooks Online might be a really straightforward process. They connect with their QuickBooks rep and arrange a couple of hours of work, and then it's moved, and now you're done, and you don't need to host QuickBooks on your server in the office anymore. For others, that might be a really big process. It might involve third parties for integrations like reporting software and payroll and all that sort of stuff. So that might be something that you kind of have to do one bite at a time, over a little while to get to that point. And you're probably going to have a few things like that. So, we want to get that into our strategy so we can start working away at those things, especially if they're going to take us a little while. We don't want to have to buy that server a year from now, like why do that all over again if we don't have to? So we want to get started on that right away. And sort of back to that rinse and repeat cycle. Traditionally it's been like, here's your server quote, get a rubber stamp on it from a decision maker, and pick the date and install it. And we're kind of trying to move away from that. Part of this is that employee skill sets are also evolving. Good strategy should ensure that you've got modern tools that empower your staff and allow them to be as productive as possible. A lot of these changes aren't so much around where you're storing data, but how it's used, how your staff are going to access it, where they're going to access it from, how they can be more efficient with it, how they might be able to automate some processes. So it's less about like just finding a home for your Excel documents and putting them on a new server, and more about rethinking like how are you going to actually get the most out of that data and become more efficient. And those new systems mean new capabilities that it's going to require user training, revisiting workflows and old habits, and again translating into that more agile, happier workforce, which translates into competitive advantage, attracting people that are happy to work with your technology and want to work with you because you've got the ability to have flexible schedules and work from anywhere, that sort of thing. I think a lot of people are becoming much more aware of what good technology looks like, and how painful it can be to work at a company with bad or old technology. Part of that strategy also means that we need more engagement from business leaders. I think I mentioned earlier, it was really sort of just like the get the server quote, run it up the chain, get it approved, and pick the install date. It's becoming a lot more involved than that. So we want to make sure that we're sitting down with the right people that really understand the vision from start to finish, and it can help us execute on that. And moving away from just simple infrastructure cycles, that I think is the biggest shift in the last couple of years, and it's really exciting. So we've got to start with a vision. The timing for this session isn't a coincidence. I think it's no surprise to most people that the last couple of years have thrown some real curveballs into people's IT planning. A lot of businesses made really great investments that were driven by a rapidly changing world over the last few years. Those outside influences really forced our technology to evolve, but it often meant deviating from previous long-term plans and focusing on more short-term needs. I can think of multiple businesses that I met with in 2020 that we're planning to do a big office expansion or build a new office in 2022, and now they're downsizing their single office, and even some have eliminated their offices entirely. Their plans have been sort of flipped upside down. They had to make really rapid investments to get their staff working from home, all this sort of stuff. So the long-term planning was I think a little shaky for a lot of businesses over the last couple of years, but things are becoming more predictable, and I think it's a really good time to return to that long-term planning mindset and start building around the new realities of working from anywhere, new expectations from employees, and just all of these new capabilities we have and all these new technologies that have evolved. Hopefully we're not going to see sort of the curveballs we have, and we can really get back to building something bigger. And that means thinking more, like 3 to 5 years out. Things will change. There will always be unexpected influences, but I think it's really important to start, thinking less about where the technology is at today, or was a little while ago, and really on where we need to be tomorrow, where we need to be a few years down the road. And I think being able to commit to that a little bit more is really exciting as well. So this means, I think, starting from scratch with the vision. If you were to start your business today, what technologies would you choose? Would you go and buy a server and host your accounting software, and your files and your databases on it? Would you want to be dependent on that server in your office? Would you want to, have to use VPNs to get to your documents? Would you want to have to do things like, buying an air conditioner to cool that room? I don't think many companies would choose to make those types of investments today. Whereas not that long ago, that was fairly standard. That was the sort of stuff that we would see on roadmaps, and a lot of it seems pretty ridiculous at this point. So, really, again, getting away from, the sort of legacy of what we have, and, if we started today, how would we do this? And I think a lot of businesses could almost, just basically break out their credit card and, sign up for Microsoft 365, right? And now you've got email hosting. Now you've got file hosting. Now you've got a way to manage all of your computers without having, that server in the office. You could go and sign up for QuickBooks Online, right? And now your accounting software is in the cloud. There's Salesforce and Dynamics and all of these, CRM solutions that don't require a server in the office. And I think that's how we would do that, if we were starting from nothing today, right? Even businesses that are more dependent on access to large files like CAD or design, engineering firms, they're even starting to have really viable options in the cloud right now to host that data, right? Those sectors were traditionally building really, really big server infrastructure, with really big capital expenditures, and that's just not really that necessary anymore. So start with that sort of like zero, point vision, right from scratch. What does that look like? And then we can start working backwards from that, right? That's where we really want to be modern. Part of that, I think, means also, getting away from some of these sunk cost traps that can affect planning. It's important to consider, current pain points, but we don't want to let that, drive our plan, right? We often hear about, like, the slow server, or the software that acts up, and of course, we want to try and address those things, but sometimes the plan gets built around that stuff. Sometimes, that slow server, well, people just opt to replace it. Whereas, I think we should be really thinking about, like, how do we tackle the pain of getting rid of that problem forever, and getting rid of that, that type of infrastructure forever. Especially when there's been prior investments, it can be a little hard to sort of walk away from those, right? But we need to think more, the 3, 5, even 10-year vision. What do we need to do to get to a healthy place there? And those prior investments probably did make sense at the time, but let's evolve those. And that means just looking at the right solutions. And like I mentioned earlier, they really do exist at this point. And sometimes I think there's like a little bit of sort of, maybe bad first impressions with some cloud software that had happened years ago. I know some platforms were not as smooth, 3, 4, 5 years ago. Even stuff like Zoom, right? 3 years ago, Zoom was a bit of a disaster, and everybody uses that now. They use Teams for all their webinars or having meetings online. OneDrive works properly now. It's really come a long way. So that means looking for the right solutions today, and maybe revisiting ones that you might have even tried in the past, and seeing how those have evolved. And who we include is really key. So, in order to build, a really healthy collaborative vision, we got to get the right people, together to build that. It means, having the right IT expertise, but also having the right people on your side of the table, and even in some cases, maybe even third parties. Decision makers will vary from organization to organization. It might be the owner. It might be a really trusted long-term employee. It might even have to include board members, if that's necessary as well. But the key is having a really good top level understanding of the vision and having buy-in at that table, right? So right people, right understanding, right amount of buy-in, so that we can drive that plan forward. This might mean an IT steering committee. So this could be a few different people within your organization. So of course it's that decision maker, but it could be various team leads, especially if you have a complex organization. If you're physically distributed, if you have really different unique operational areas, you may want to represent them in that planning process. We do want to be careful to keep it small, to be selective. You want to get the right personalities. In some cases, one person can really derail your planning process. That's often really well intentioned. They might just be trying to keep costs down, but through that, they just might not have a really good understanding of the true costs of cutting corners or technical debt, or underinvestment, right? So sort of being aware of that, as well. We want to make sure we've got the right people. And what can happen there as well is, if you don't have the decision maker involved in your IT planning committee, sometimes the value just gets lost in translation, right? You can have a really good planning process and people are bought in, and when it sort of works its way up through your management chain, the message gets changed a little bit. There's that game of telephone. We want to make sure that everybody's really involved firsthand in those discussions around value and where we're going. So, and think about who your key stakeholders are within your company. Who really gets it? Who wants to build things better and see a successful company in the future, right? Those are people that you want there. So, what do we include on our roadmaps through that process? So, starting with the basics, we really need to make sure that we're just getting the hardware and the housekeeping done. While we're trying to break away from server cycles and that sort of stuff, there is hardware that we're going to have to manage into the future, right? And to plan for. And that's gonna be the basics, like computer replacement cycles. Oh, I didn't realize the chat wasn't in the way there. Hopefully, that wasn't there too long. Sorry, folks. So basics like computer replacement cycles, making sure that everybody has the essentials to do their job, the essentials to connect to modern systems, to be able to use SharePoint and OneDrive and for all that to work smoothly, so that they aren't struggling with the really foundational pieces of technology, like an old computer, right? Or something that's got an old operating system or has security vulnerabilities. So trying to systematize that as much as possible, and then we can get onto the bigger strategy, right? Part of that housekeeping is also just regular proactive maintenance. So making sure that the systems that we have are maintained well and that they're kept running well. That could be something like if you've got your files in SharePoint, maybe it's been a couple of years since you made that move, and things need a little bit of a revamp. Maybe you need a bit of guidance on how to keep that well organized, or maybe how to leverage it more, right? There may be some automation, things like Power Automate within Microsoft that can save you mouse clicks, and save you some of that manual workflow. You're going to want to be investing in that continuously, to try and get the most of those systems. If you're paying $30-something a month per person for Microsoft 365, you're not getting very good value if you're just using it to host your email. But as soon as you get more data into it, as soon as you leverage that automation, as soon as you start managing your computers and using that to get rid of servers and that sort of stuff, well, that $30-something a month actually becomes a really, really good value proposition. But you've got to invest to get there, right? It's not all set up. When you swipe your credit card with Microsoft, it takes time and it takes effort to get the most out of those systems, and that's something you're going to want to be doing, continuously, right? Other stuff like networking hardware, we want to make sure that we're just planning for those cycles as well. That can tend to it tends to get run a little long, I think, in some cases, and sometimes we end up paying for that in downtime and unpredictable network behavior and all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of another one of those things that we want to file away into a system. Make sure that we're just addressing it at the right cycle, and not letting it become a distraction from the real high value technology decisions. And then just your foundational licensing. I mentioned like 365 Business Premium, accounting software, all that sort of stuff. Making that just a part of your regular recurring costs, and understanding why they're so valuable, I think is really important. That's part of that buy-in as well, making sure that the right people are there for those conversations and they understand what that invoice really delivers. So here's a example of just a hardware report that we would use with our clients. So we can see from this client here, they've got an older server, so hopefully they're on the cusp of replacing that, and that's going to maybe require some tough decisions. If you've got a server that's 6-7 years old, and it's going to take another year to move everything off of that and to migrate everything to the cloud, well, that might actually mean investing in another server for the short term, just to ensure that your business isn't affected by unexpected events like server hard drives failing, that sort of stuff, right? Those can be tough investments, and we see that sometimes, right? Sometimes there's something that we call technical debt, and this would be a really great example. It's where a server's been run a little long, and often the intention is saving a bit of money, getting a bit more value out of it, running it a little further, and often that ends up getting paid down in downtime and disruption, that sort of thing. So if this is maybe sort of the reality you're looking at, you may need to sort of make that investment as well, stabilize things and focus on modernizing at the same time. That technical debt, it carries interest in a lot of cases, so we kind of have to face that in some cases. Looking at workstations here, this is sort of indicative of maybe a proactive process that's fallen off a little bit in this case. We can see that they've got a chunk of their computers are under 3 to 4 years, which is great. But we see at the very bottom, they've got those computers coming up on 9-10 years. So more technical debt, right? In this case, this company is probably going to have to front load some investment to play some catch up to be able to get to a place where they can replace their computers with a predictable monthly cost and keep that cost down. For a smaller company, it might look something like this. If you've got 20 employees, and we're aiming to replace all of our computers at 48 months, at 4 years, that's about a new computer every 2 to 3 months, right? So we can do the math on that. We can figure out what that looks like, and then it's really easy to get that to your finance team and let them know, like, hey, like this is going to be the system moving forward. This is how we get away from people's computers dying during presentations, or people who are working remotely, maybe in a satellite office, well, their computer dying, and now we have to ship them on all that sort of stuff, right? Or just running slow, right? All this stuff that adds up. It doesn't take a really complex system to get this running. It's really simple math, but it's committing to that, right? If we don't have these sort of foundational systems in place, it's really hard to get to like the really nice stuff. So thinking about what you've got for hardware and what that might look like, how many staff you have, you can figure out that monthly cost, and then it just becomes manageable, right? You can budget for that. And if you are super far behind, there are ways to address that. There's low cost leasing, sort of a lease to own systems where if you got to replace 30 computers all at once, well, you can lease them and sort of buy them out for like $10 at the end of the contract, that sort of stuff, right? To reduce the sort of pressure of large capital expenditure. There's all kinds of creative ways to get caught up on technical debt. So with the foundational stuff taken care of, we've got those systems in place, we can start talking a little bit about short-term strategy. So that's going to be stuff like, minor line of business software. So line of business software, might be, like donation software for your nonprofit for getting funds in. It's going to be, probably not necessarily your main piece of software, but the minor stuff, we have to account for that as well. Everything needs updating. Everything as new versions come out eventually, or maybe better options. So we want to make sure that we're representing, basically every piece of software that we need. Short term is going to be technical debt as well. That's when you've got those 10, 20, 30 workstations that are super old. We don't necessarily want to try and fix that plan over 3 to 5 years because now they're going to be, 9 years old, right? And there's going to be a lot of pain over that time. So we're going to have to address that in the short term and come up with a way to get that out of the way. And sometimes it's unexpected changes, right? That could be sudden growth. You end up getting funding for a brand new program if you're a nonprofit, and now you've got 15 more people than you planned on having this year, right? It could be new opportunities. You land a great big new client, and you need more people for that, or you need new systems or new software, and it could be in external forces. I'm definitely tired of talking about the pandemic, but that's a great example, right? That was something that shifted everybody really, really rapidly, and we had to focus on that short-term training, or sorry, short-term changes, and lastly, it's training. Training is continuous, and that's something that we want to be building into every stage of our plan. And then we have our long-term strategy. So this is going to be the bigger stuff. This is like, decommissioning the server, over the next 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, if it's a really, really complex, process. It's going to be security and privacy compliance. So this is going to be, committing to continual investment in our security. This is going to be, doing the foundational security like multi-factor authentication, getting all of that in place. Data protection, in SharePoint, helping to protect data so that it can't be exfiltrated. If there's a breach, that sort of stuff. There's all kinds of mechanisms that we can put in place, to improve our long-term security and privacy compliance as well. And also your major line of business software, right? If you're a Dynamics user, Salesforce, the large CRMs, it's a continual assessment of whether that's the right solution, what type of updates are required there, the integrations that plug into it, efficiency, user training around it, making sure you're getting the most out of that. We want to make sure that we're really evaluating all of those systems, regularly. And communication collaboration, I think that's really been the theme, recently for us with a lot of clients is, how do we get more out of Teams? How do we help our users use it more efficiently? What does their phone system look like? Does that maybe integrate? How are they accessing data? Do they have the ability to access a spreadsheet from their phone, from their mobile device? Can they do it from anywhere in the world without having to connect to VPNs? That sort of stuff. As we become more distributed, as we work from anywhere more than we used to, that communication collaboration side is, I think, really going to drive a lot of our plan. And I put training in both our short and long-term strategy because that is also going to be continuous. We want to make sure that we're keeping our users as sharp as we can, and they're able to get the most out of the systems that we provide them. So here's an example roadmap that would include that short-term strategy, the foundational stuff, and the long-term. And what we have here is, we have a company That's pretty typical of what we see with like new customers. They've got a server in the office. It's probably a few years old at this point, and they're just really trying to modernize. They're hoping to get rid of that and to get onto better systems. So what they've done here, and what we've done is we've started with, well, here's our identity security fundamentals. So that's getting some security measures in place where they're probably deficient. So that could be like multi-factor authentication, things like conditional access, where we can create policies that determine how and when and where you access your data. So that might mean deciding that nobody can log into your 365 accounts from outside of North America because you don't have offices in Europe and you don't have offices in South America, that sort of stuff, right? And just making sure that whatever we're doing next, wherever we're placing data next, that's all secure and we're not worried about breaches. And then they're looking at moving their accounting software, right? So in this case, it's Sage 300. We're moving it off of our local server, so we don't have to buy another one to host it next time. We're going to make that software easier to access from anywhere. We're going to be doing our basics like workstation replacements, including that in the budget. So finance has visibility into that, and they understand that they're going to have to, factor those costs into the larger investments, like the big projects, that sort of stuff. Next we're moving our computer management over to Microsoft Intune, which is one more server role, where we're taking those computers, we're managing them with Microsoft's cloud systems. It makes people more mobile. They're less dependent on the computers being in the office. We know our security policies are going to apply to them regardless of where they are. And that's, again, part of that, leveraging, those recurring costs like Microsoft 365 even more, getting as much as we can out of those. They're moving files into SharePoint, OneDrive, again, more mobile, data from anywhere, and more secure. There's some security measures that we can do in the cloud that we actually can't do, with servers in the office, that sort of thing, right? And even small stuff, like just moving your printing to the cloud, right? Like that might actually be, a really big move for some companies. That might make a big difference between whether they need a server or not. So we want to make sure that we sort of capture all of the different parts of that vision that are going to get us to a more modern more modern office. And we want to factor in things like if we're going to have a new satellite office, we want to make sure that's on the roadmap. That might be really complex, or it might be really easy depending on how modern our technology is. For this company, if they're opening that satellite office in early 2023, if they're able to work through most of these roadmap items, that actually might be a really simple move for them. It's a matter of putting in some network hardware and maybe some docking stations for their laptops, that sort of thing. They're not planning to add more servers or any of that sort of stuff because they've built that vision. And now that new office, is instantly going to fit that vision. It's going to be representative of it. And, the ease of doing that is just going to be that much better, right? So I think, we want to make sure we encompass as much as we can within that plan and sort of get that like one-page vision going. But how much do we budget? This is, often the trickiest question because it really depends. It's going to depend on, industry, individual businesses, where they're at, how much technical debt they're carrying, and what their vision looks like, right? So just some very broad, industry figures to give you a starting point. We see, most professional sectors are, investing anywhere from about, 4 to 11% of their revenue on IT. Now, 11%, that's definitely higher into the range. We typically see that in like financial services or, sectors that are really, heavily dependent on technology. Sectors like manufacturing, that sort of thing, they may be investing, toward the lower end of the spectrum, but that again depends. Some manufacturing, operations are becoming really dependent on technology and really trying to evolve what they do. You might be a trucking company, right? And in the past, you've got a bunch of trucks and 5 people in the office with computers. But maybe now that means that you've got GPS in your trucks, you've got mobile payment systems, you have computers and mobile devices, with drivers. You have automation for your logistics systems, or filling plants and all kinds of other stuff that just didn't exist years ago. So that might mean that you go from like a 1 or 2% investment as a manufacturing company, maybe to like 10%, at least over a period of time, as you modernize, right? It's going to shift. It's not necessarily going to be the same every year, but we do want to make sure that we are allocating enough and figuring out like how much does this need to be, right? So that we're planning for the next couple of years and working that into the budget ahead of time. We see that worldwide IT spending is set to grow, and it has been for the last few years. About 5% in 2023. I think that trend is going to continue, and it's something that we'll want to reflect within our own budgets, and making sure that we're able to invest and adopt new technologies and train our staff and not fall behind. That this is really a competitive advantage, right? Under investing can mean that we fall behind, and our competitors are more efficient. Their costs are lower because they've been able to get more out of their tech. And it's a shift away generally from from CapEx, at least for hardware. There's going to be obviously incremental investment in projects and improvements, that sort of thing. But getting away from those very expensive servers, that sort of thing, right? Our budgets have to evolve, and the planning has to evolve to account for the different ways that we'll be spending our money in IT in the future. I think a lot of it's going to be consultative as well. So, instead of buying that $20,000 server, it may mean investing $20,000 in somebody that can come in and help you get the most out of your technology, help you with the automation, that sort of stuff, right? So probably similar costs, but just allocating those in much different ways. And where am I investing? So to start off, it's IT services, right? You need to have the expertise. You need to have that guidance. Just the day to day, right? We're always going to need somebody to fix computers and fix Outlook when it doesn't open, and help our staff with small stuff. And that really should be an investment, right? It should be a strategic relationship. It should be somebody that is going to deliver more than just help desk, right? They're going to be involved in high level planning. They're going to be somebody that you can bounce ideas off of and really get involved in your business, right? So yeah, IT services should be an investment. We want to see it that way. And if you don't feel like you're investing, then we want to find somebody we can invest with. Those recurring costs, just getting really used to having that Microsoft 365 invoice, right? Looking at that as an opportunity, like how do we get more out of that, rather than just like a cost for email hosting, and getting away from, I think some of those, those perceptions. That hardware lifecycle that we talked about, just core infrastructure, all of that, we want to make sure that's represented. And the continual improvement, right? So getting back to training, security standards, just maintaining and leveraging. I think this is really going to become the meat of our budgets in the future, is making sure that that's part of the system. And part of that's going to be technology. Security nowadays is not just an obligation, but it's really an emerging strategic advantage, I think. As best practices change, as new threats change, you're going to need to invest to keep up with those, right? Privacy legislation, insurance company expectations for, say, cybersecurity insurance, the public's expectations, those are all rapidly changing, and it's an advantage to quietly invest and lay low, and not have breaches and not be on the news and that sort of thing, right? Those are huge distractions, and we want to make sure that we're working with those risks up front and proactively, and not getting caught in those situations. And it's something that's not going to end, right? This is going to have to be part of the process, for forever and for always, right? The bad guys are only getting better. The threats are only becoming more sophisticated. So we have to make sure that that's part of the plan moving forward. And we got to drive that plan. it's great that we have the right people in the room, we've got the right things on the roadmap, we've got the cost figured out, and we've got some commitment. But some of these plans are going to happen over months, years. We have to make sure that we are continually pushing them forward. So that pace is going to depend on where you're at and what your needs are. For some companies that may mean meeting monthly with their IT people, right? To keep that plan moving, or even just as you're developing that plan. For others, it may be that you're meeting every maybe 6 months, right? You've gotten the technical debt paid down. Everything's in a really good place. You're serverless. You're really into the cloud services. You understand them well. Your staff are trained up. So you might be able to sort of slow that down for a little bit, but that will change, right? Those needs will change, and we want to make sure that we're matching the pace to our roadmap, and that we're staying involved. Some of that technical debt, it may need front loading as well, and that's something that we often see, is that a more aggressive approach up front, and then getting into a regular maybe slightly slower meeting rhythm after that. And just generally shifting to a more proactive vision. I think sometimes these traditional ties where we tie our planning to like server cycles and that sort of stuff, those can actually really create some time crunches. So an example might be like, maybe you've got like a 2 to 3 year old server, and the warranty's good for 5 years. So we're kind of thinking, well, we'll just line everything up with the end of the server, right? We'll move our files when it's done, when it comes end of life. That may not be the right approach. We actually probably want to start working on those things quite a bit sooner, making sure that we have time and space to do them right. You often, with the say SharePoint migration, you're going to want to work department by department, right? Give people time to train their teams and do stuff like this really, really well. So, I think maybe getting away from some of the sunk cost of a server that's only a couple of years old, and really trying to inject that vision a little bit earlier is going to probably save you over time, but also make the process of getting there a lot easier. And just involving involving your IT team in that high level strategy. There's a lot that a dedicated IT team can help you navigate. Just assessing new initiatives could be something simple like a minor piece of software, right? Often for us, that's a bit of a sign that there may be more we can do there. A client will come to us and say like, hey, I want to try this new piece of software for sharing files with my clients. And we go, well, actually, you already have that capability, through 365, through SharePoint, right? And being able to show them how to use that. Or, maybe recognizing that there's sort of a bigger need in place. Maybe this actually ties into some problems with their CRM software, right? It's a function that, should exist there, but doesn't. We can start going, okay, well, there's a better platform out there. It solves your file sharing need, and it solves all of the other problems that we've seen over the past little while. So keeping our IT people tuned in is super important as well, so that they can be a part of that vision. Yeah, that's what we have for our planning session today. Looks like our it's a little smaller now, but yeah, I would love questions if anybody has any.
I haven't seen any come in quite yet. Oh, Rajiv, do you have one?
Hey, I don't have a question though. First, thank you so much for arranging this session, Ty, Haley. This is wonderful. I just want to share and validate my thought with you guys. Like when we are talking about a planning, do you think there is a value of making a larger plan to be called as strategic planning, and a smaller plan, which can be called as operational work plan, and linking your operational work plan with the strategic plan to in an ideal situation, and you can take the benefit of department and division. They're focused into like IT department and the other stakeholders. They will be very much focused into those activities. Those are planned year whole, maybe the operational plan, which will be reaching to your strategic plan, do you think it will add any value towards the successful planning, or is just something nice to have? It doesn't matter.
I think that, yeah, that could definitely be an approach. I think if I'm understanding it right, there's been a couple clients where we've kind of done it that way, like maybe not like that intentional, but we've had, you know, sort of a roadmap for like just the basics or short-term stuff, and then, you know, the kind of high level stuff has made it onto like their own strategic plan more so. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, like having a strategic plan for, let's say, 3 to 4 years down the line, and maybe setting up operational plan for each and every year, and setting up the KPIs, all the metrics that can be trackable every year, the